the organizational culture needs to change. Simply put, culture is the way we do stuff around here. If you look at governance in a small, limited approach, then you can compare to the iceberg. It's the things that are above the water, the procedures, the processes, and that we just control them. But what really drives the organization is all the stuff that's below the water. If you ask almost any board member, is it important? You would have a resounding, yes, it's really important. If you ask the question, okay, then what are you doing about it? You may find a lot of silence.
Welcome to the chair. I'm Najia, a strategist and governance expert. And in this space, we explore how real decisions are made. Today's chair, Marc Jacobs, on the invisible force shaping organization, the culture. He has a gift reading the room and showing how culture can make or break leadership. Let's begin. Marc, thanks a lot for accepting my invitation. Today we want to talk about culture, governance, intercultural management. So my first question is, you have a background in intercultural management, governance, and innovation. Can you share your journey and what led you to focus on cultural intelligence in business?
First of all, thank you very much for having me here today. And it's a pleasure sharing some experiences on this topic. So a few words about my background. I'm an engineer by training, so very technical mindset in a way. I came to Luxembourg 28 years ago, was co-founder of an industrial company, packaging company. We exported 99% of what we did. You can imagine in that business. And from day one, we were very much aware or sensitive to the different ways of working of our customers. So we chose to adapt to that. And that's, practically speaking, work with our German customers in a more process-driven way, with the French more diplomatic, with the Dutch more direct, etc. And it really translated into superior business performance because my customers regularly told me, Marc, you guys are different. It's just easier to work with you than with your competitors in the market. You're almost like us. And I'm like, duh, we're working hard at that. But we did it based on experience, affinity for the topic, etc. And the challenge with that is that although it delivers results, it's hard to transfer to other people, and it's not scalable. So then now about 12, 13 years ago, I came across an academic framework of Professor Geert Hofstede that puts all this fluffy stuff, intangible, in numbers. And as an engineer who is aware of the importance and the value of it, being able to approach it with a system perspective is like light bulb moment, really. So that's really the whole background. And then back then we did actually a workshop with our European management with Professor Hofstede Jr. And it was like the light went on. And that really was the starting point for me on this journey.
Wonderful. I have one question. Can we come back to the governance and the definition of the governance and definition of cultural and how it fits, how it helps each other?
It's a very important question because how do you define governance? And I see in organizations where it's really just about legal compliance, making sure that the organization complies with the rules. For me, it's a much bigger topic. It's the role of a board is also making sure that all the elements are in place so that the strategy of the organization can be executed to the best possible way, including that the values of the organization are included in everything we do, etc. If you look at it like that, holistically, as the role of a board of governance, then culture suddenly becomes extremely important because, simply put, culture is, say, the way we do stuff around here. And if you look at governance in a small, limited approach, then you can compare to the iceberg. It's the things that are above the water, the procedures, the processes, and that we just control them and make sure. But what really drives the organization is all the stuff that's below the water. It's how are decisions actually made? How does communication work in this organization? How do we value our customers? Do we want to be very open, or do we have silos in the organization? All those things that are much more intangible. That's really what, let's say, is culture. But now we're talking organizational culture. We're not talking national culture, which was my initial starting point. And I do want to be very clear on that, because in the end, say a national culture, I can't change it. You can't change it. It is something that we need to learn, understand, develop strategies on how to deal with the challenges, leverage the opportunities that come out of it, reduce friction losses between created by misunderstandings. That's national culture, and it really drives what people feel emotional about. That what in an organization, an organizational culture. The key question is: does it support my strategy? The execution of my strategy, does it support my values? Yes or no? That's it. It's really as simple as that. And then it's about all the working practices, the behaviors, the beliefs, etc. that support that. That is your organizational culture. And that is something that, as leaders of an organization, you need to define. You need to choose what that needs to look like in order to support that strategy. And that's completely different from just learning what it is. No, now I've got something that I need to manage. Yeah. And it's a difficult topic. I mean, if you ask, I would say, almost any board member, is it important? I think you would have a resounding yes, it's really important. If you ask the question, okay, then what are you doing about it? You may find a lot of silence. Yeah? And the reason for that, at least in my perspective, is that it's considered a fluffy, intangible topic. And typically boards are, they're used to metrics, KPIs, things that are tangible, etc. So you really need to be able to visualize that culture, organizational culture, in numbers, because then it becomes manageable.
Yes, it's true. And we all know that the role of board members is to oversight those kind of metrics. And is there any metrics to measure culture and how it is well integrated in an organization, how it is well managed?
Actually, yes.
Examples?
Yes,
Yeah.
totally. In the case of my organization that I work with, so we have a whole tool set that allows us, together with the customer, to actually go in and measure, first of all, and then visualize in numbers what the actual culture is. So we take that whole intangible stuff, translate it into numbers on a range of different, we call it dimensions of organizational culture. Now, measuring is one thing, but where do you need to be? Yeah. So that setting where you need to be is something that we do in workshops with boards, with the executive management team. Say, okay, as a function of your value, as a function of your strategy, etc., what should it be? Yeah, how open should we be, or how strict should we be on implementation of processes, or how customer oriented should we be, or etc. Those types of questions. Once you've said that, it's like your future balance sheet. Yeah, think this is where I need to be in order to execute my strategy to the best possible extent. This is where I am today, my current balance sheet. Yeah, you can do a gap analysis and say, okay, now how do I close that gap? Yeah.
And do you have any? So it's something tangible to clearly demonstrate that cultural intelligence in a business can create value or can help to growth value.
There are multiple situations. If I take actually, currently we are working, I'm personally working with several companies where we're in post-M&A situations. And I don't think it's a big secret that a lot of M&A situations really don't create the value that is intended or hoped for, or planned. And very often it's because there's actually very much a cultural clash in the organization. And it's less of a national culture clash, which can play a role. It's much more an organizational culture clash. And then there's multiple ways of dealing with it. And you can say, okay, it's my way or the highway. And then you have a lot of people that leave. You may have a lot of customers that leave. Yeah, that would really be dramatic. Yeah, I mean, both are absolutely dramatic. Yeah? But you see it a lot. You see it. There are plenty of occasions where that happens. So we have a range of customers where we really think, okay, this is our culture. Let's say the acquiring company. Yeah, this is the culture of the company is being acquired, and then we consciously say, okay, what's the best of both worlds, and what should we be doing going forward? And then obviously it depends on the relative size of the organizations and the relative maturity, etc. There's many variables. But the point is that it's a conscious process, and it's a quantitative, numbers-driven, conscious process. And that changes the game.
Would you say that it creates a third value set, or it is the stronger, or the buyer is how to say, there is no.
I don't think there's a right and wrong. Yeah, necessarily. I think the important thing is that it's a conscious process and a conscious choice of where the optimal position would be for the organization.
Yeah, I like the idea that it's something that we really pilot somehow, because it's not just we will put the two organizations together and let's see what's going on. Yeah.
I mean, when you're in an M&A situation, you integrate balance sheets. Financially you do that. So same with culture. Really that simple. Yeah.
What's the biggest culture of negotiation mistake executives are making during the process?
Okay. I think now we're back a little bit in the field of national culture. But if I try to take a little bit of a helicopter view, I think the biggest mistake is thinking that people from other backgrounds think like you do. Yeah. And have the same decision-making thought process, the same things that they really value. And then as a next step is, you need to really dive in and understand it to be more successful. But if you take an example, in more collectivist countries, say towards Asia, further south, the relationship with your counterpart is extremely important and drives everything. Yeah, in essence, if I don't build a proper relationship, you're never going to get to the optimal result. Whereas in the more individualistic countries, say generally speaking, Western Europe, US, etc., Australia, I don't need that relationship to be able to do business. It's a nice to have. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but if I come from a Western perspective and I'm going to negotiate in a more collectivist environment and I'm not aware that relationship is key,
yeah, you miss something.
You're highly unlikely to have, call it, the best possible success. I'm not saying this can't work, but it's going to be far from optimal.
And how do governance models differ across cultures? And what can both learn from these differences?
That's a complicated question.
Because we have to find, this kind of balance between, diversity. We want diverse thoughts within the board. Mm. But in the meantime, we have to know how to manage this.
Yeah. And if you take an example of, let's say, a large global company as an example, you want a clear guideline, corporate, this is how we do stuff. That's part of your corporate culture. But I think what my recommendation would be is that you really need to think about what is the essence that we need on a corporate level that's the same wherever we go, and what are the elements where we can be a bit flexible, where we can localize, if you want, and really have that approach, that thought process. If I take an example, it's somewhat related. Where in the past, one of the companies actually the one I mentioned, we sold it at some point to an American company, so it was an M&A situation. And our customer contracts, commercial contracts, would be 3-4 pages, because we are in the European legal system, and where we sold to an American company, it's a different legal system, very different, and same business, same type of customers, same type of products. US 40-50 page contracts with lots of details. We had 3-4 page contracts, for the same business. Why? Because here in Europe, a lot of potential conflicts are taken care of by the system. Whereas in the common law environment, you really need to look at all the what ifs. And at the time, the legal team of our acquiring companies, excuse me, what's this? Is this a contract? This was their first acquisition as well, so they were learning. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, no. Now you're part of us. You need to adhere to our compliance, which is fair enough. I mean, it's totally logical. But now think about, I've been doing business with customers in Europe for a decade with 3-4 page contracts. We have a new owner, and I need to go to my customers with a 40-page contract. What do you think that customer will think? What's his first reaction?
Something is missing, or
Most likely it's going to be, don't you trust me anymore?
Yes.
Yeah? Don't you trust me anymore? Yeah? So what constitutes a basis of trust in the common law environment may kill trust in the civil law environment.
Exactly.
And vice versa. So you really need to take all these things into account from a board perspective, from a governance perspective. Yeah. So where we ended up is I actually had this conversation with our lawyers. I said, look, you didn't buy a successful company to kill it. So let's find a way. Yeah. So we did exactly that. We really looked at what are the absolute must-haves from a US perspective, and what are the nice-to-haves. Yeah. And so we managed to reduce the contract size to about 10 pages, which had the must-haves in there, but none of the nice-to-haves for the US. But we were compliant, and I could, with a 10-page contract, I could go to my customer and say, okay, situations changed a bit, and that worked as an example. So it's a combination of what are the must-haves and what can you localize.
Exactly, because at the end of the day, governance is also a way to bring transparency and at the end to bring trust. So culture is a tool, in fact, to bring this trust, definitely. Totally. So competitive advantage.
Absolutely.
Do you see any other example from real world, especially when it comes to partnership or joint ventures? Any other examples?
Yeah, we're really coming back a little bit to the M&A situation, but but partnerships, yes. I mean, I can take an example of a construction company, and actually a Belgian company that's active globally, and they run into this kind of situation all the time, because think about the construction world, large projects, you have temporary partnerships between all kinds of organizations all the time. Yeah, so they run into this complex mix of having to work together between different organizational cultures, first of all, and then if you're thinking about this Belgian company, they are quite hierarchical. They're very much top-down, centralized decision making, and I can think of a practical example where they were doing a major project in Scandinavia somewhere. Well, Scandinavia is really not hierarchical. It's very egalitarian, and it's much more. Let's discuss this and find a consensus together. Very cultural. So you have the organizational cultural difference already, and the national cultural differences. So in this case, and this was before we started working with them, but actually my Belgian contact in that company said that their Scandinavian partner invited them for a 2-day workshop up front before they were going to do anything, to really discuss how are we actually going to work together. What are your must-haves? What are my must-haves? And not assume anything and get to know each other. He said, and in the beginning I thought, excuse me, what are we doing here? Yeah. He said, but it was the most successful, most I'd say important element that contributed to the success of the partnership. To trying to find that out before you get started. It's like doing your cultural due diligence before you do an M&A, etc. So they did it on a, let's say, non-quantitative way, but the mindset was there, to really address the subject before you hit the difficulties.
Which advice would you give to someone who is founding his ventures, like a startups, or in order to take into account this cultural factor, I would say? Because, there is plenty of situations like, when you are looking for investment, when you are looking for selling your solution to big companies and you are a startup, and this kind of situation.
There's several aspects to this, several levels to this. I think if you're looking at doing business, doing selling, I would initially first focus on really understanding the national culture components of what that counterparty what their normal might be, what their decision processes might be. I'm going back to my own experience, but let's say if you're selling your products in Germany, the real decision makers most of the time, or at least have a very powerful influence, are the experts. Exactly. Yeah, it's not necessarily the buyer or even the owner or the CEO. Mm-hmm. No, it's the expert. That's the real power holder. Yeah, you need to know that. You need to go and find that power holder, and then you can be successful. I've got plenty of stories around that. In France, it'd be very different. Yeah, the decision maker is probably not even the people you're talking to, somebody higher up in the organization. Yeah? Be aware of that in a hierarchical environment, the decision authority is high up in the tree. It's not delegated. So just be very much aware of that and take that into account. And then, now, once you're transitioning, let's say, from a startup to a scale-up, really be attentive to what is functional as an organizational culture. Because when you're starting, everything's going to be flexible. It's going to be, you have to adapt quick and etc. You don't want big processes and systems, because a lot of the time you actually don't even really know what your business is going to be. Chances are you have to pivot 2, 3, 4 times before you really find the right way of doing things in your business area. So during that phase, everything needs to be flexible. It's that simple. But once you've found and you're going into a scale-up phase, your organizational culture needs to change. You need to have more processes in place. You need to be you need to be stricter, etc. And that can be really hard. Really hard. Yes. But if you can, again, do it in a structural way, visualize it, put numbers on it, just like your balance sheet. Say, this is what I need to have. It makes it a lot more manageable.
So just to remind, many business struggle with this, with balancing global governance standards with local cultural reality. Mm-hmm. How should both approach this challenge? How would you, some actionable, we can say, insights that tomorrow you may have a board, I can already start to ask those questions, start to take action and...
Well, on a concept level, I'd say really think hard about what's your must-have.
Yes.
And what can you localize. Okay. And then make sure that you have a system in place. And I would say, because it's so important, make sure that one of your board members, it's her or his responsibility. It's part of this is your role in this board to make sure that that's integrated, and then that person becomes, let's say, the topical expert.
And what would be the most valuable skills a non-executive directors needs to stay relevant in this, I would say, in this business world, multicultural business world?
It's more of a mindset. Yeah. Don't assume that other people think the same way you do. Don't assume that your normal is everybody else's normal. And non-executive directors, they do a lot of professional training. Take a course on this. Be aware of it, so you actually have tools that can help you manage it. I would definitely recommend that.
That would be the key piece of advice you would give to a board member?
For me, the key piece is have someone on your board whose responsibility it is. Because if nobody takes ownership of the topic and everybody yeah, it's important, but there has to be ownership. Somebody has to have ownership of this. And then how you translate it and etc. is the next step. But somebody has to have ownership.
Okay, thanks a lot, Marc. It was wonderful.
You're very welcome. It was a pleasure. Thank you for having this conversation. I hope that it can contribute a bit to the governance scene in around here. Thank you.
Thank you.